Good morning. How's everyone doing? Yes, looks like we're a little light after the party last night, maybe, but welcome. I'm glad you all are here. Are we a few? Oh, we're ahead. Oh no, there's the title screen. So AI is revolutionizing developer experience. I just got asked to kind of paint a picture for what the takeaway is for this talk, and it's actually really interesting. We'll talk about what AI is some. We'll talk about why we're not really talking very deeply about that as well. But more importantly, we'll talk about kind of the meta impact of AI and change, and hopefully kind of ease some nerves and maybe anxiety that people have about that. So that's my goal today, specifically relevant to a developer audience, and we'll get into that more and more. Now, how many people went to a talk yesterday that had AI mentioned in it in some capacity? Probably a pretty good amount of hands, yeah. How many people were also at Shift last year? Pretty good amount of hands as well. I wasn't here last year, but I have recognized myself, and then someone else called this out last night while we were sitting and drinking tea, and called out the fact that something is different with Infobip Shift this year, and it's really small. It's actually on this screen. I'll give you a second to kind of look and see if you can find out what this really tiny thing is on this screen that is different from last year. But it is the inclusion of a specific track dedicated to AI. And this is probably not that big of a surprise for you, maybe not. If we look at everyday life, we're starting to see AI pop up everywhere. Everyday tools that we use, how we write code, etc. So I want to show like a couple of examples of things that I use on a daily basis that have now started to add these features, and you can kind of use any example for things that you use in a similar fashion as well. So if you look, you can find AI anywhere, almost anything that you use. And I use Notion. Anybody else use Notion to track notes and projects and maybe to-do lists and that sort of thing? So I use Notion. I've used this for several years. And every day I have this routine of I check what's in my to-do list, how do I prioritize that, how do I check off some of those boxes. So Notion is something I've used for a long time. And if you look at the homepage, you have to scroll down a little bit and you get to the piece where they've added Notion, Notion AI. So they've now incorporated AI into everything that you could possibly do in Notion on a daily basis. Now, other tools that I use, one is Hashnode for publishing blog posts. Anybody else publish blog posts to Hashnode? Maybe cross post from your personal. We need to get some exposure for Hashnode, I think. That's not many hands. Hashnode is a platform targeted for developers to create blog posts, and you can cross post those from your personal website. And if you look at their homepage, you don't see AI on the top view, but if you scroll down a little bit, you'll start to see it. And I just recently started using an application called Eraser. Has anyone heard of this, eraser.io? Really neat. It's a diagramming tool. Thank you. It's maybe just us. That's okay. But a diagramming tool that's built specifically for developers as well. And if you look at the homepage, very small in here, but you can see it. If you dive in a little bit deeper, they've got something GPT, diagram GPT. So they have AI to generate diagrams for you. Do you know why, or do you ever think about why all these platforms are incorporating AI into their products? Basically, yes. The comment was because of their investors, and the answer is money, right? They look at the opportunity with AI as a revenue generator. Now, there's the other aspect of how can AI really benefit us, but at the end of the day, it comes down to money. And there's a few numbers that I'll reference. I'll give you a QR code to scan a couple of articles if you're interested in doing some additional research yourself. But a few numbers I'll list out throughout this talk, one of which is the expected AI market size in just a few years to be $407 billion. So if you look at all these products making all these intentional efforts to incorporate AI over the course of just a few months, it really comes down to money and the impact that can have. And when I think about all these products, and I think about their rush to incorporate AI, and I think about all the money and potential there is in AI, the one thing I come back to for myself is change. I see a lot of change happening. Originally, when I kind of wrote the abstract for this talk, it was talking about the impact of AI over the course of 6 months. It's now been an additional 6 months, basically. And what we've seen is a tremendous amount of change. And I've spent the majority of my career in the developer experience world, in the developer relations, developer advocacy title. And so I've done 3 things professionally in my career. I've been a developer, a speaker, and a teacher, and I've done some combination of those professionally for about 10 years. And my personal philosophy is I use content creation to teach and inspire developers. So I do YouTube, I have a podcast, I do other things. But I'm really starting to think about and focus on this change. And as I think about that, and I think about the context of myself being on this stage, talking about AI, if I'm completely honest with you, I feel a little bit like a fraud. And there's a few different reasons for that. One of which was, let's get rid of the alert there. One of them was exacerbated yesterday, unfortunately, by Swix's talk on AI. How many people attended that one? I don't know if you're here somewhere. One of the smartest people that I've ever gotten to talk to in such a good way. And so he had, I took one picture of a slide to post on Twitter. He then had another one where he called out, this is a keyword that you need to know if you want to know anything about AI. And I sat in the back knowing that I was going to be on this stage talking about the impact of AI and developer experience, having no idea what that term is. Because I don't consider myself to be one of the smartest people, especially when it comes to the area of AI. I consider myself to be an average developer, just like everyone else. I don't have specific deep knowledge in algorithms and anything buzzwords associated with AI. What I do know, though, is the impact that I see on a daily basis. And the other thing that comes to mind for me, feeling like a fraud, is I submitted a title and an abstract. That's how this works when you apply or get asked to speak at a conference. Those are 2 things that you have to submit. And I actually generated those to start with AI. Now you could pause and read this whole thing. You could also then compare this to what the end result was of my abstract. And if you do, you'll notice those 2 things are very, very different. But I use AI as a spark of creativity and imagination that I think I lack at times. So I will often, and you'll see examples of this, I'll often go to ChatGPT and just ask it to do something for me. Give me ideas. What's an app that I could build for a YouTube video? What's a talk that I could give at a conference? And so again, you'll see these are 2 very different abstracts after I get through making my personal touch. But it does feel a little weird to be on a stage representing myself with a title and abstract that were at least inspired by AI. So there's 2 articles that you can take your phone out and scan if you would like, that I'll kind of reference throughout this talk. The first one is about AI statistics and trends. So the stat that I showed you a second ago is from this Forbes article. I honestly don't know how much, it's from Forbes, but I don't know how much stock to put in that article. It's just numbers, but they're kind of fun talking points, I think. But probably the more interesting article, and I highly encourage you to read it, is called AI and the Automation of Work. And we'll kind of dive into a lot of that and the impact of change over the course of history, and then relate that back to what we talk about developer experience in the context of AI. So let's start with a little history lesson, going back a little bit in history. Now, this cover is from my dad's favorite musician, Bob Dylan. I don't know how many people listen to or are fans of Bob Dylan. It's not really something I've listened to a lot, but it was my dad's favorite by far. To the point where I was almost named Dylan, as a fun fact. My mom adamantly said, no, we're not going to do that. But there's a quote in this song that says, "You better start swimming or you sink like a stone." And I actually hadn't picked up on that until listening to this song last night. So this slide has been updated as of last night. As I heard that line, and I really thought about how that relates to my talk and things that I already had planned to talk about today. So I wanted to include that. And my thought process is very simple. If you're not willing to adapt, in life, whether it be professionally or relationships or anything else that you have going on, I think you will fall behind. I think you'll get left behind if you're not willing to adapt. And I think this is something that I historically, over the course of my career, over the course of my life, personally, I think I have done a good job at. And what I've come to accept is the reality that you live in from one day to the next can be completely different. Now, there's lots of things that could influence this. I've gone through my fair share of death in family. I've also started new jobs. I've also moved to major cities across the US. I've also traveled internationally, which is an amazing experience to be here. I've done a lot of things. But in any of those big moments, the life that you led, the life that you had the day before is dramatically, drastically, definitively different than the life you have today when those big things happen. One of those for me, my new reality is my daughter, who is now 4 months old, which makes me traveling much more difficult than it ever used to be. My wife actually sent me this picture. So the first one was a little old, a couple weeks ago, a month ago maybe, and this one was one she sent while I was here. But as of May 18th, 2023, my reality, the world that I live in, is dramatically different than the one I lived in the day before. My life will never be the same as it was pre-kids, now that I have our daughter, now that we have our daughter. So with each milestone in life, good or bad, you're now living in a new reality. And I feel like I've done a good job of that myself personally. As I reflect on the things that I've done and the changes that I've gone through, I feel confident in my ability to accept and embrace those changes. But a lot of people are not. And you may work with some of these people, you may know some of these people, but these are the people who were stuck on how it used to be, who are not excited about what today could bring, who are not excited about some of the changes, some of the new technologies. And in the JavaScript ecosystem, I'm a JavaScript developer, it's overwhelming, right? So it's a little bit of an exaggeration. But there's a world of opportunity every day in development, in tech, as programmers, to learn and to embrace and to continually get better. And I've been surrounded at different points in my career of people who don't embrace that, people who are at a company and they accept this is basically the end. Like I'm gonna stay at this company, I'm gonna work here until I retire, I'll make whatever money I make, I'll use whatever shitty tech stack that I don't like anymore just because it's not worth doing anything else. I've worked with those people and you may have too. And I can tell you that's not a fun environment to be in, and it's not one that I want to be in at all. I want to be surrounded by people who are excited, who are motivated, who love to learn, who love to build, as we do as developers. And there's maybe one big reason for that, and that is very simply that I'm a millennial. And millennials think, and I think they get judged for this, we think that we should get paid more, that we should have better hours, that we should have better vacation, that we should work less, that we should have better work-life balance, that we should have all these things. And oftentimes, I think we very unfairly get judged for that. And typically, that judgment comes from an older generation that's used to doing things a different way, that isn't ready to embrace change. But that's not who I am. When people judge, I think I should make more money, I think I should work less, I think I should blah, blah, blah. People see that as like, you have to earn your tenure, earn your stripes or whatever. But the reality is, why would we not work in a better world every day? Why would we not work to get those things why would we sit with what we've been given up until this point? Why would we not be trying to push change in the things that we do? So, all of that said, the talking about change, the going from one day to another, one of the most common questions that I get and that I see is, will AI take our jobs? How many people in the last year have thought about that? Anyone relatively concerned about the impact that AI will have on your jobs? It's funny, I have to turn for like everyone over here to raise their hands when you're on my back, so I'll like, cool. If you would have asked me this, and I've talked about this on podcasts and different things, if you would have asked me this a few months ago, I would have definitively said no. I would have said I don't think that AI replaces developer jobs, and I would have given the caveat of I think it augments them, it changes them in a way, but I feel much more confident in that, but also going a little bit of a step further to kind of flip my view to say that I definitively think AI will take developer jobs, but probably in a different way than you would expect. Because if you look at the industry, we ask people to raise their hands here. 77% of people in general are fearful of losing their jobs. And I think it comes down to that willingness to change, that willingness to adapt, and not only willingness, but also the ability to embrace that. And if we look at the history of change, we had, the telephone, we had trains, we had airplanes. We have all these significant moments in time of the reality of the world that people lived in from one day to another was drastically different, definitively different. When you have these major innovations, evolutions, the world that people live in is different. So I'll start to do a couple of quotes from this article working, the URL is working with AI. I highly recommend reading this. And the quote says, every time we go through a wave of automation, whole classes of jobs go away, but new classes of jobs get created. Okay, so maybe if things do go away, maybe more jobs pop up. So let's go to some more statistics. According to Forbes, 400 million jobs could be lost due to AI. Okay, that's a lot. It's a little scary, that's a little intimidating. But here's the bright side. 97 million jobs could be created. Now, if you're not as excited about that statement as I appear to be, you probably realize that losing 400 and gaining 97 doesn't come out to a net positive. That's a still pretty big difference in jobs that are lost that are not being replaced. And so you may be sitting in the audience, if you paid attention to those numbers and thought about it, you may be scratching your head. And so I'll walk you through another quote that I found very interesting. It talks about the frictional pain that happens along the process of change. It talks about the fact that new jobs may go to different people in new places, but the net positive of what we do, the caliber of life that we live, the power that we have to build and create things continues to grow as a net positive. So I want to introduce you to something. This was brand new to me. Anyone heard of, I believe it's Jevons paradox. Anyone heard of this before? It makes me seem a lot smarter if no one has, so that's good. So the Jevons paradox basically says if it becomes much cheaper and more efficient to do something, you might do more of it. And what this is here to address is the concern, which I think is valid, where if you look at AI being able to do what would have taken you 6 hours to do in the past, if AI could do that in 30 seconds, what's the value of your job? That seems reasonable. That's a reasonable fear, is why would companies not just continue to use AI, not pay my or your very expensive developer salary? Where and how do I fit in if AI then replaces that? It's a great question. It's a great concern. It's a valid concern. But what I think we fail to consider with this is if we, as individuals, by harnessing the power of AI, as developers by harnessing the power of AI, if we then have the ability to do more, maybe what we're capable of building is more than we ever dreamed about before. Maybe our fear with AI taking our jobs comes from our lack of being able to imagine what we're able to do with the newfound power of AI in our tool belt. Maybe we've never been able to see a future from here on because we had no idea beyond the tools that we already have what we would be capable of doing and building. And I think this is especially true in the world of development. Anyone have their own product, own company, SaaS product that you built, Something small, something big. Again, I have to look around for hands, hopefully. A few people. For people that have, built hobby projects, side projects, etc., think back to what it would have been like to build that thing 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Should we even go back to 20 years ago? Can you imagine what it was like trying to build what you might build now 10 years ago? We could kind of break it down a little bit. If you were building something 10 years ago, you probably weren't leveraging the cloud. So you had your own server. Maybe you were sophisticated enough to have your own warehouse full of servers. So you were managing upgrades, you were managing patches, you were managing fault tolerance, you were managing uptime. You were doing all of these things manually. All of that was your responsibility, which is a lot. Unless you're like a cloud developer or like a site reliability engineer or something like that, most of us on a daily basis don't have to worry much about just maintaining infrastructure now. What a privilege it is to be in the world as a developer that has so quickly escalated to empower us as developers as it has. I watched Chris's talk yesterday. He was on stage here. How many people saw Chris yesterday? I followed him for a long time, got to meet him in person yesterday for the first time, and a quote stood out to me, and I jotted it down and put it in the slides here because I think it very aptly describes what I'm trying to get across in these couple of slides, and that is that it's absolutely incredible what you can do as a developer, as a web developer specifically. It's absolutely incredible. It's absolutely mind-blowing what we are capable of doing thanks to, and I apologize to Chris because I'm going to bring up a competitor. I'm a huge fan of both Netlify and Vercel. But think about deploying something to these platforms. I remember the first time that someone showed me Netlify, and I remember them showing me, you have a GitHub repository. You've been doing that for years. You already know how to do that. Now just log in to this new free platform, tell them which project you want to connect to, and now you have a hosted site. You don't have to worry about infrastructure at that point. If it's a static thing, you're not having to worry about scale. What a mind-blowing pivot in how we deploy and manage applications. And this goes across the boards. One of the fun demos that I have, so I co-host a podcast called Compressed FM. And for each one of our episodes, we have cover images. So we've been doing mostly guest episodes now where Amy and I and Brad, some combination of us, have a guest on to tell us about a thing that they built, something they learned, a philosophy they have, etc. And what's unfortunate about that, for every one of those episodes, we have to create a new cover image. But what a wonderful world that we live in that we have a technology like Cloudinary. I'm a big fan of Cloudinary. You can automatically not just edit or transform images, but you can also add overlays. So if we go back to this, that image that you see up there, there's a base image, and then programmatically we add on headshots and titles for that specific talk. That's now more time, because I'm not having to do that manually each time, more time that I get to invest in. We get to invest in the thing that we enjoy most, which is talking to developers across the world. And there's a slew of these. I used to work at Auth0. I'll talk more about Auth0 in a second. But Auth0, how many people are identity security experts? This is more of actually what I expected, where no one raised their hands. OpenID Connect, OAuth 2, JWT, buzzwords, right? I see some half nods. I doubt there's very many people who confidently agree that they are very knowledgeable in that area. But that's kind of the beauty of it. A product like Auth0 enables you to build secure applications without having to understand at depth how it works. A product like Zeta is one that I've been using recently as a database. It has some cool features that I'll talk about in a second. It has a UI, it has a TypeScript code generator, really nice. I use a couple of products called AppWrite and Supabase that are back-end as a service platform, so they do authentication and database and a real-time thing and so many things, and they take care of all that stuff for us so that we as developers can continue to build. But this also, looking back at my history as a professional in the developer experience realm, really brings up, I think, one of the struggles of being a developer advocate. And I've kind of touched on it, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. And it goes back to my time at Auth0. So at the time when I applied for Auth0, I was starting to get back into doing content, to doing YouTube videos, to paying for myself to go and speak at conferences. And I realized this is what I love, this is what I want to do. I want someone else to pay me to do it. Fair? So I looked at Auth0, someone had connected me to Auth0, and I went into these interviews, and I literally know nothing about Auth at a detailed level. I know how to log in. I don't know anything about implementing authentication, authorization, secure applications. I know nothing. But what I did have is experience doing this, speaking and doing workshops and content, etc. So I joined Auth0, again, a very technical product without that technical expertise. And this brings up the struggle in developer relations of the beauty of something like Auth0 is that you can build secure applications without understanding any or a lot of the underlying technologies and best practices that go into that. So as a developer advocate, talking about developer experience to developers, what's the balance of how deep do I need to go into teaching them Auth fundamentals, or do I just focus on enabling them to go and build the thing that they want to build in a secure way by leveraging what we as a company and a product had already done? I think this is a constant struggle in developer relations, is finding that balance, the balance of educating versus empowering. And I think the majority of that comes from, or leads to, a higher priority on educating, actually enabling, than educating. Enabling builders to continue to do what we do. So I've got a few examples of things that I have used in my development workflow. One is GitHub Copilot. I think we did hands yesterday for this, and I think there were a pretty good amount of hands for GitHub Copilot. I published a video early on, and the title was, "This is why I'm not using GitHub Copilot." And the reason was, my assumption was that it wouldn't be able to do the thing better or faster than if I just did it by myself. And from my perspective, for me personally, I was 100% absolutely wrong. The things that GitHub Copilot can do are absolutely mind-blowing to me. I don't know if other people have had the same reaction, but it has absolutely blown my mind of what it is capable of, and then by virtue of that, me being capable of. And there's a kind of interesting question in here of how does this affect learning? Right? If ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot is writing all the code for you, how do you learn? And that's a legitimate question, I think. Part of the answer also is we're used to doing this anyway. Stack Overflow is how we've been writing production level software for the entirety of our development careers. Right? There's actually a fun, Amanda's over here. This is created by Wix. They gave away these little 2 keys, copy and paste, keyboards at another conference earlier this year that I thought were fun. So it's not like we haven't been in this situation before of copying and pasting things. I think we have to be responsible in how and when we do that and pay attention to the things that we're copying and pasting. But it's not new. And I got ahead of myself. I mentioned ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT almost on a daily basis, whether it's for code or inspiration or whatever. I use it almost on a daily basis. And I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves on how many other people are getting benefit from it as well. 1 million people in the first day, or 5 days, sign up for ChatGPT. And I think it was up to 100 million in 6 months, which is absolutely wild. Now, there was a fun use case for this. I run a Discord called Learn, Build, Teach. So it's an open Discord community. And I wanted a way to kind of engage people a little bit more. So I asked ChatGPT, can you give me 50 questions relevant to JavaScript, imposter syndrome, struggles of learning, etc.? Can you generate 50 questions and format them in a JavaScript array for me? And so it did it. I read through them. I was like, these look pretty good. So I copied and pasted to keyboard. I copied and pasted them into a document that I wrote some JavaScript to iterate through that array, save them to a database, and then wrote a cron job to every week post the discussion question of the week in Discord. I don't think that that makes the value that I provide for my community any less. Maybe you disagree. But I now have an automated way to try to get more engagement in my Discord community. What's really wild to me, though, is in addition to ChatGPT, there's the OpenAI API, and as developers, we have the power to harness this completely with an API. So anything that ChatGPT could do for us, we can now implement into our applications. And there's one that stands out to me. This is not necessarily on the developer side. It's on the content creation side. I'm a big fan of the founders of VideoTap, but the product in general. And it takes a YouTube video, uses AI to generate blog posts, to generate social media clips, to generate subtitles and descriptions and tags, all these things, which enables me to create more out of the original piece of content that I have and share that across multiple mediums and platforms. It's actually my little tiny picture up there, if you can see that, is what the arrow is. One of my favorite frameworks is Astro. Astro added a Houston AI. Zeta, as a database that I mentioned, has a vector data type where you can store, I wouldn't even be able to give you a great explanation of this, but the type of data associated with something that you can then use to do intelligent searches with. And then one more is Fig.io, is a plugin that I use in my terminal that gives IntelliSense and a lot of other things, which has built-in AI commands to be able to do things like generate bash scripts from text for you. It's really cool, one of my favorites. And I think the key of this is we've been through several phases of hype. This is not a shot at other communities and things that people feel are important, but Web3 and crypto and things like that never resonated with me. AI feels different. Because every day so far, I'm able to see and leverage the impact of AI in my daily life. It feels different to me. But it doesn't come without its limitations. I don't know how many people use automated syncs, have used automated syncs. This thing right here, if this thing can't work efficiently, if it can't determine if my hands are under the water on a consistent basis, how in the world are we fearful of AI taking over? This happens to me way too often, almost everywhere I go. And why is this not better? If we have things like AI, how is that not better? There's some other interesting examples for people to go and look at. The self-driving cars, the cone of shame. People figured out if you put a driving cone on top of a self-driving car shuts down and can't do anything. As intelligent as AI is, it can't handle that. It breaks down. It can't do it. A lawyer blamed ChatGPT for citing a case that either was wrong or didn't exist. I don't know if we figured out law yet to be able to sue ChatGPT for wrongful information, so that's probably not going to work out in his favor. Microsoft's Bing, this is not a shot at Bing, all of them have had their issues, but they've had lots of interesting things that have come out of AI. You can go and do your additional research. And then the last one that I have, I showed the video this morning. It's so creepy that I didn't show it live. I thought about doing that on stage, but it's so creepy I didn't. You could search for it. It's the Toronto Blue Jays use AI to generate a hype video for their baseball team. In I say the US, they're actually in Canada. It's one of the creepiest things you will ever see. You should go watch it out of entertainment value. But just when you're fearful of where AI is and potentially replacing us, go and watch that video. So the reality is, if AI was 100% correct, it would be absolutely terrifying. But it isn't. We're not there yet. That's not the reality that we live in yet. Maybe we get there. I don't think so. There's one more tweet, or a tweet from Catalin Pitt, who talks about ignoring messages that were generated by AI. And this is really interesting because somehow deep down, Even though the message seems genuine, Catalan can innately figure out that this misses the human touch. What AI can't do is it can't replace humans, it can't replace interactions, it can't replace me being on the stage, it can't replace the conversations that we might have in the hall. And I believe very strongly in the power of people. My name is James Q. Quick. I do a lot of things. I run a podcast, I have a YouTube channel, I'm active on Twitter, I have a Discord community, I speak at conferences. But most importantly, I use content and my platform as a speaker to teach and inspire developers across the world. Thank you.